The day I walked into that courtroom at the Barafunda courthouse, my heart felt like it was dragging chains. I hadn't slept the night before, tormented by the possibility of losing my daughter, Julia. She was only 8 years old, but she was my whole world. Mariana and I had grown apart over time, but I never let that affect how I cared for our daughter. Even so, nothing prepares you for the Cold War that is a custody battle. Mari was sitting on the other side with her lawyer, a guy in an expensive suit with an arrogant smile. Her eyes didn't meet mine, but her lawyer made up for the hostility with every venomous word that came out of his mouth. He painted me as unstable, irresponsible, even dangerous. They presented evidence, text messages taken out of context, photos that didn't tell the full story, and sworn statements from her family. Each piece was like a nail being hammered into a coffin I hadn't even realized I was lying in. What hurt the most was the way people looked at me, as if I were a villain in a story I never asked to be a part of. I kept looking at Julia, sitting so quietly next to the court psychologist. She wasn't looking at anyone. She just stared at her sneakers, her small hands folded carefully in her lap. I wanted to go over, hug her, and tell her everything would be okay, but the distance between us seemed deeper than the walls of that courtroom. Dr. Marcos, my lawyer, tried to stay confident, but I could see the worry in his eyes. Mariana had hired one of the most expensive law firms in the city, the kind that represents celebrities and entrepreneurs. I was just a high school math teacher. How could I compete with that? The judge, Judge Paul Mendez, looked tired. He had probably seen dozens of cases like ours that week. Fathers and mothers fighting, children caught in the middle, lives being decided in a few hours of a hearing. He was flipping through documents while Mari's lawyer talked about my episodes of emotional dysregulation, which were really just normal arguments we had during our marriage. Mr. Robert Allen has a history of erratic behavior, the lawyer continued. Ms. Mariana fears for the minor's safety when she is in his care. Safety? Julia was never in danger with me. It was our Sunday afternoons at the park, our nights watching animated movies, our mornings making pancakes together. I was the one who knew the names of all the characters she drew, who knew she was afraid of thunderstorms, who understood she needed the hallway light on to sleep. The courtroom seemed to suffocate with accusations. The ceiling fan spun lazily, offering little relief from the summer heat. I looked at the window and saw a patch of blue sky, imagining what it would be like to just grab Julia's hand and run away. Go somewhere where we could just be a father and daughter, without lawyers, without judges, without papers trying to define who I was. Mr. Allen, the judge's voice brought me back. Would you like to respond to the accusations? I swallowed hard. I wanted to scream that it was all a lie, that I loved my daughter more than anything, that I would be incapable of harming her. But I knew emotional outbursts would only confirm what they were saying about me. So I took a deep breath, looked the judge in the eye, and began to speak, trying to keep my voice steady even when it threatened to break. As the hearing went on, I felt more and more helpless. Dr. Marcos tried to counter-argue, but the momentum was against us. Mari's lawyer had a ready response for everything, and the judge's expression remained unreadable, almost indifferent. It was like watching someone weigh a life on a scale, with my daughter trapped in the middle. Your client missed 3 consecutive school meetings last semester, Mari's lawyer accused. Because I was giving extra lessons at night to pay for Julia's orthodontic treatment, I replied, but my voice seemed small, insignificant in that room. I couldn't stop reliving the moments that had brought us here, the bedtime stories about the little astronaut girl who discovered new planets, the Saturday mornings watching cartoons on the old living room couch, the bike rides on the bike path. Would these memories now only be mine? Would a judge reduce them to irrelevance based on distorted evidence and assumptions? Outside, the noise of traffic filtered faintly through the windows. Sirens in the distance, occasional honks. Life was going on out there while mine seemed frozen in that moment. Ached to realize this could be the last day I was the parent Julia lived with. Soon I might just become the weekend dad, the one who watches his daughter grow up in photographs and supervised visits. Julia remained silent. She hadn't said a word since we came in. That silence was screaming louder than anything else in the room. The judge looked at her from time to time as if wondering when or if she would speak. I didn't know what she would say. I didn't even know if she wanted to be with me. That uncertainty tore at my chest more than any accusation could. Mari avoided looking at me or Julia. She stared at a spot on the wall, as if she wanted to be anywhere but there. For a moment, I remembered what we were like in the beginning, two college students full of dreams. I was studying math. She was in law. How did we get to this point? When did love turn into this Cold War, where our daughter was the disputed territory? We would like to present another document, Your Honor, her lawyer continued, handing a folder to the judge. These are records of conversations where Mr. Allen shows aggressive behavior. My stomach dropped. I knew exactly what they were. Screenshots of WhatsApp arguments during our divorce, when we both said things we shouldn't have. Words taken out of context from moments of anger and pain, now used as weapons against me. The court psychologist, Dr. Lucy, was flipping through her notebook. She had visited my apartment the week before, seen the room I prepared for Julia, the photos on the walls, the children's books on the shelf. She had spoken with Julia alone too. What would my daughter have said? What had the psychologist noticed? Time seemed to drag. Every minute was an eternity. I looked at the clock on the wall. We had been there for 2 hours already. Julia must have been hungry. She always got cranky when she didn't eat on time. Did Mari still remember that our daughter needed to eat every 3 hours to avoid a headache? I had brought a cheese sandwich and an apple in my backpack, her favorite snack. But I couldn't just interrupt the hearing to feed her. It was then that I noticed something strange. Julia wasn't just quiet. She was focused. Her eyes weren't empty as I first thought. There was something there. Determination? She discreetly fidgeted with her school backpack, the one with the unicorn print that we bought together. What was she doing? The judge sighed, adjusting his glasses. I think I've heard enough from both parties. Before I make a decision, I would like to hear the psychologist's report and, if possible, the minor's opinion. My heart raced. Julia would speak? What would she say? After everything Mari must have said about me at home, after all the arguments Julia witnessed, what would her words be? I was afraid. A deep, visceral fear that my own daughter might say she didn't want to live with me anymore. And then the moment came. The judge leaned forward, removed his glasses, and gently addressed Julia. Sweetheart, I know this is difficult, but it's important that we hear what you want. Would you like to tell the court who you wish to live with? The room became completely still. My breath caught in my throat. Julia looked up for the first time, her eyes bright but firm. She didn't cry. She didn't back down. She stood up, adjusting the hem of her blue dress with trembling fingers. And then she said something I will never forget. Your Honor, she began, her voice small but clear. I have something to show you. Her words cut through the silence like a blade. She reached into her unicorn backpack, pulled out a cell phone, mine, and slowly walked toward the judge's table. Everyone watched in stunned silence as she held it up and said, Please, watch this. The judge nodded and one of the clerks helped connect the phone to a screen. My stomach churned. I didn't know what she was going to show. My hands were trembling. The screen flickered, and then we saw it. A video I had forgotten she recorded. It was from a Sunday morning in our apartment. Julia had taken my phone to film us making cornmeal cake, laughing as I pretended to be a cooking show host. And now my assistant Julia will show you how to mix the secret ingredients, I said. In the video, using an exaggerated announcer's voice. Julia was giggling, her face smudged with flour. The video switched to us dancing in the kitchen in our socks, me lifting her into the air as she screamed with joy. We had just gotten the news that she had made it into the school choir, and we were celebrating. In the background, you could hear music playing on the old kitchen radio. The second clip showed her crying after a nightmare, and me comforting her, whispering stories until she fell asleep again. "It's okay, Jules. Daddy's here. No monster will get you as long as I'm here." My voice was soft in the video as I stroked her hair. It was from the night there was a bad thunderstorm and she had woken up scared at 3 in the morning. The last clip was from just a few days before the hearing. She was filming herself and saying, "I want to stay with Daddy because he makes me feel safe. Mommy is always nervous and working, and when I'm with her, it's Grandma Celia who takes care of me. With Daddy, we do homework together. He knows my friends and he makes food I like. Please, let me stay with my dad." The simplicity and honesty of those words were overwhelming. I looked at Mari and saw that she was pale as if she had been punched in the stomach. Her lawyer was scribbling furiously on a paper, probably looking for a strategy to counter what we had just seen. Nobody spoke. Not the judge, not Mari, not even her lawyer. The video ended and the room remained suspended in silence. My eyes were moist. I looked at Julia and she just smiled at me. A small, brave smile that held more power than any legal argument ever could. Dr. Lucy, the psychologist, looked at Julia with a mix of surprise and admiration. She made a few notes in her notebook, and then looked at the judge with a slight nod. The judge cleared his throat, visibly moved. He looked at Julia, then at me, then at the lawyers in the room. "I believe we have seen what we needed to see," he said softly. Mari's lawyer tried to regain control, citing legal protocols and how videos could be staged, but the judge raised his hand to silence him. "Counselor, I believe the spontaneity of these moments speaks for itself. It's evident they were not prepared for this hearing." Julia returned to her seat. I watched as the weight seemed to be lifted from her small shoulders. For the first time in weeks, she seemed calm, as if she had finally been able to tell her truth in a world that kept trying to silence her. And for the first time, I felt something change in my favor. It was just an 8-year-old girl against a complex legal system, against expensive lawyers, against elaborate accusations. And yet, with her simple honesty, she had accomplished what I, with all my desperate explanations, had not: to be truly heard. "I will consider this testimony in my decision," the judge said, looking directly at Julia. "Thank you for your courage, young lady." Then he turned to the lawyers. "I will make my decision shortly. For now, the hearing is adjourned." When we stood up, Julia ran to my side holding my hand. I didn't care about the looks, or Mari's lawyer whispering furiously in her ear. I just squeezed my daughter's hand, feeling that maybe, just maybe, we had a chance. The days that followed the hearing were surreal. I returned to my apartment that night with Julia, a temporary permission granted by the judge until the final decision. In the building's elevator, she held my hand tightly, as if afraid someone could separate us at any moment. "How did you know how to do that with my phone, Jules?" I asked as I prepared spaghetti with tomato sauce for dinner, her favorite dish. She was sitting on the kitchen counter, swinging her legs. "Aunt Fern taught me. She said sometimes adults don't listen to kids, so we need to show them instead of just telling them." Fern, my younger sister, a computer science teacher at a public school. Of course it had been her. Always inventive, always ready to help. I didn't know she had talked to Julia about the hearing. In a way, I felt guilty that my daughter had carried this burden. "You weren't mad at me for using your phone, were you, Dad?" Julia asked, biting her lower lip. I served the spaghetti onto 2 plates and sat down next to her at the small kitchen table. "Mad? Jules, you were the bravest person in that room." That night, after Julia fell asleep in her room, filled with glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling that we had put up together, I sat on the balcony with a beer. The phone wouldn't stop ringing. Messages from Mari, furious, accusing me of having manipulated Julia, of having instructed her on what to do. Messages from Dr. Marcos, optimistic for the first time in weeks. Messages from friends, family, all wanting to know how it had gone. I ignored them all. Instead, I stared at the city lights, thinking about how an 8-year-old child had accomplished what I, with all my adult arguments, had not: to show the truth in a way that couldn't be distorted. The video Julia showed wasn't perfect. We weren't perfect. There were days when I lost my patience with her because of the mess in her room. Nights when I was too exhausted to read one more bedtime story. Chaotic mornings rushing not to be late for school. But what that video showed was real. The imperfect, everyday, persistent love that united us. It wasn't a performance to impress a judge. They were just fragments of our daily life captured without pretension. The next morning I took Julia to school as usual. Mrs. Celia, the doorman, smiled at me with a new kindness. "Good morning, Professor Allen." "Good morning, little." "Julia, did you know I'm going to stay with my dad?" Julia announced, adjusting her unicorn backpack on her shoulders. Mrs. Celia looked at me, confused. "Is that true, Professor?" "We don't know yet, Jules," I explained, feeling the words weigh on me. "The judge still has to decide." "But he saw the video," Julia insisted, with the certainty only children have. He understood. At work, I tried to focus on my classes. Teaching quadratic equations to restless teenagers seemed trivial compared to what I was going through. During break, the principal, Mr. Thompson, called me into his office. "Robert, I heard about your situation," he said, offering me a coffee. "If you need flexibility in your schedule because of the hearings, you can count on us." It was a small but significant gesture. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like a presumed criminal. The phone rang at 3 in the afternoon, while I was explaining matrices to the senior class. It was Dr. Marcos. "Robert, the judge wants a meeting with the parents and lawyers. Tomorrow, just the 4 of you and him." My stomach dropped. What did this mean? Was it a good sign? A chance for Mari to reverse the impression the video had made? "What do you think will happen?" I asked, leaning against a wall in the empty schoolyard. "Honestly, I don't know. But one thing's for sure. After that video, he can't see you as the monster they tried to paint you as anymore." That night was long. Julia wanted to watch Despicable Me for the 1,000th time, and I let her. We sat together on the couch, eating popcorn and repeating the lines we already knew by heart. She fell asleep in my arms, and I stayed there motionless, listening to her soft breathing, afraid it might be one of the last nights like this. When I finally carried her to bed, she murmured, half asleep, "Dad, even if I have to go live with Mom, I'm still going to be your daughter, okay?" I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Always, Jules. Always." The meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m. the next morning. I didn't sleep. I mentally went over every possibility, every argument, every outcome. When the sun began to rise, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink, I took a shower, put on my only unwrinkled dress shirt, and prepared for another battle. The meeting room at the courthouse was smaller than the courtroom, more intimate and somehow more intimidating. I sat next to Dr. Marcos, across from Mari and her lawyer. Judge Paul Mendez came in last, carrying a thin folder. "Good morning, everyone," he said, adjusting his glasses. "Thank you for being here. I called you here because after watching that video yesterday, I felt the need for a less formal conversation before making my decision." I looked at Mari for the first time in days. She looked tired, with deep circles under her eyes. For a moment, I felt a pang of the old affection that had once united us. After all, we both loved Julia, each in our own way. "Ms. Smith, Mr. Allen," the judge continued, "what I saw yesterday made me think. Julia's opinion is clear, but I also need to better understand the dynamic between the two of you." Mari's lawyer leaned forward. "Your Honor, we would like to point out that videos can be manipulated, rehearsed. An 8-year-old child is easily influenced." The judge raised his hand. "Counselor, I heard your objections yesterday. Today I want to hear from the parents." He looked at Mari. "Ms. Smith, from what I understand, you allege that the father is emotionally unstable and that the child is not safe with him. However, what we saw contradicts that narrative. I would like to understand your perspective." Mari took a deep breath. When she spoke, her voice trembled slightly. "Your Honor, I never wanted to take Julia away from Robert. I just wanted to ensure she had stability. Since our separation, he lives in that small apartment while I can offer a house with a backyard close to her school." Her words hit me like a punch. Was that what this was about? The size of the apartment? The neighborhood? Money? And what about the accusations of aggressive behavior, the judge asked. Mari hesitated. Robert was never violent. We had arguments like any couple. My lawyer thought it would be easier to get full custody if... She stopped, apparently realizing what she was about to admit. Her lawyer quickly intervened. What my client means is that there were legitimate concerns about Mr. Allen's ability to maintain the structured routine the child needs. The judge looked directly at Mari, ignoring the lawyer. Ms. Smith, I'm going to ask you plainly. Do you believe your daughter is in any kind of danger when she is with her father? The silence that followed seemed endless. Finally, Mari shook her head. No, Your Honor. Robert is a good father. He always has been. I felt a wave of relief so strong it almost made me dizzy. All those accusations, all those harsh words in the legal documents, and now this. Mr. Allen, the judge turned to me. You work full-time as a teacher. How do you plan to reconcile that with the daily care of a child? It was the question I expected. Your Honor, my hours at school are compatible with Julia's. We leave together in the morning and I'm home when she gets back. On pedagogical meeting afternoons, my sister Fern picks her up from school. We have a support network. And what about extracurricular activities? Schoolwork support. The judge continued. Julia has ballet on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I take her and wait at the door. I help with homework every night. We participated in the science fair together last year. She won an honorable mention with a project about the solar system that we built. The words came out naturally. They weren't rehearsed arguments. They were just our routine. The judge jotted something down. Then he looked at Mari. And you, what is your routine with Julia like when she is with you? Mari shifted in her chair, uncomfortable. I work late at the law firm. My mother stays with her in the afternoon. On weekends, we try to do things together. I see, the judge murmured, making more notes. And what about the judicial psychologist's suggestion of shared custody? How do you feel about it? Mari's lawyer started to speak, but she interrupted. I could consider it. She looked at me briefly. If we could establish clear rules. It was my turn to be surprised. It was the first real opening since this battle began. Mr. Allen? The judge asked. I always wanted Julia to have constant contact with her mother. I replied sincerely. It was never my intention to separate them. The judge closed his folder. Well, I see some progress here. I suggest that the two of you, along with your lawyers, work on a shared custody proposal that is realistic and considers the child's routine. I will schedule another hearing in a week to review this proposal. And let me be clear, the priority here is Julia's well-being, not your egos or conveniences. When we left the room, Mari approached me in the hallway. Robert, can we talk? Without lawyers. I hesitated for a moment, then agreed. We walked to the courthouse cafeteria, a simple place with laminate tables and the smell of cheap coffee. Why did you do it, Mari? I asked when we sat down. Why all those accusations? She ran her hand through her hair, a gesture I knew well from our years together. Because I was scared, afraid of losing Julia, afraid she would prefer you, and I was right. A week later, the official decision came. Shared custody with Julia living primarily with me during the weekdays, with visits to her mother on alternating weekends and one night during the week. It wasn't just a legal victory. It was the validation of everything I had tried to be as a father. All because of a little girl's voice and her courage to speak when it mattered most. The path to get there wasn't easy. After that conversation, at the courthouse cafeteria, Mari and I had to relearn how to communicate without hostility. We sat together in my apartment, in the presence of the lawyers, and worked out a detailed plan, schedules, responsibilities, decisions about school, health, extracurricular activities. Do you think we can make this work? Mari asked when the lawyers left. For Julia, we have to, I replied. That night when I told Julia about the agreement, She hugged me so tightly that we almost fell over. I knew it, Dad. I knew it would work out. How did you know, you little smarty? I asked, adjusting her hair. Because you always say the truth comes out in the end, remember? Like in the stories you tell. Yes, I remembered. They were the stories my own dad used to tell me when I was a kid, before I came to the city for opportunities. Stories about honesty, perseverance, about how good always finds a way. Stories that I passed on to my daughter without even realizing how much they meant. That night I put Julia to sleep in her room, her real room, in our home. She asked if we could make cornmeal cake the next morning, and I laughed through tears, promising we'd make a whole one. She hugged me tight and whispered, "I knew you wouldn't give up on me." I never would, and I never will. Some victories don't come with trophies or parades. They come with a little hand in yours, a thank you whispered in the dark, and the knowledge that no matter what the world throws at you, love, real love, will always find a way to express itself. In the months that followed, we established a new routine. Julia went to her mom's house on Fridays after school, and I picked her up on Sunday nights, on Dao. Wednesdays, she had dinner with Mari. At first it was strange, with Julia telling stories about her mom's house, about Mari's new boyfriend who appeared a few months later, about the dog they adopted. "Dad, do you get sad when I talk about Mom's house?" she asked me one night while we were doing math homework at the kitchen table. "No, Jules. I'm happy you have good times there too." And it was true. What I wanted wasn't to win against Mari. It was just to have my daughter in my life. It didn't need to be exclusive. There was enough space in Julia's heart for both of us. Over time, the wounds healed. Mari and I even managed to talk civilly at school meetings or Julia's ballet recitals. At one of them, we sat side by side, applauding as Julia twirled on the school theater stage, dressed as a space ballerina, a combination of her two passions. "She seems so happy," Mari commented. "It's because she knows she has both of us, even if in different ways," I replied. On the first birthday after the court decision, we did something that would have seemed impossible months before. A small party. At the park with both families present, Julia ran among the guests, proud to have everyone she loved together. Fern, my sister, approached me as I was getting the cake ready. "Who would have thought, huh? After everything, just look at this." I looked around, my parents talking to Mari's mother. My nephews playing with Julia's cousins on her mother's side. Mari's new boyfriend helping to set up the tables. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't what I had imagined when I got married, but it was real and it worked. "Do you know what Julia told me the other day?" Fern continued. "That she has the best family in the world because she has two homes full of people who love her." I swallowed hard, feeling that familiar mix of joy and pain that had become such a part of my life as a father. She's right. Later that night, when I took an exhausted Julia home, she fell asleep in the car. I carried her to bed, like I used, to when she was smaller. As I tucked her in, she opened her eyes briefly. "It was the best birthday ever, Dad." "Really? Better than last year at the amusement park?" "Uh-huh," she murmured, already drifting back to sleep. "Because everyone was there. Everyone I love." I sat on the edge of the bed watching my daughter sleep. The stars on the ceiling were still glowing, though more faintly now, needing to be replaced. How quickly time passes. Soon she would be a teenager, then an adult. But no matter how much time passed, I would be there. Not as the perfect father, but as the father she needed. The father who learned that love isn't about possession, but about letting go and letting grow.